كن سعيدا كن فريدا عش بفخر في الحياة لا تبالي.
Lift up the name Lord Jesus. Who came and died on the cross for us, and who is seated at the right hand of the Father. We pray that He will guide us our words as we speak. So today we are going to discuss one Quran versus many Qurans. Throughout centuries, we hear from Muslims the claim is there is only one Quran. Quran is a book which given to from Allah to ensure Gabriel, which passed to the Muhammad and he passed to the people. So when we look at the claims, here's the basic claims we hear from Muslims. You all know Ahmed DEEDAT?
No.
Sad that there are Muslims who don't know. He died, thanks God. So, he is one of the Muslim polemists, has thousands of followers. He makes a claim that there is only one Quran and throughout centuries, and we read the Quran which is given to Muhammad and not even a dot changed. And then we've got Zakir Naik, disciples of Ahmed DEEDAT. He makes the same claim. There is only one Quran, not even a dot, not even a verse, not even a word changed in that Quran. And then of course, we've got Mansur Ahmed, scholar of Speaker's Corner. When Muslims struggle to answer the questions, they would go to Mansur. He makes the same claim. He said, I stand here and confirm that not even a dot changed from that Quran. That is from teaching of Muslims. So the claim is there is only one Quran and not even a dot change. I'm gonna make a case that actually that's not true. That wasn't the case at the time of Muhammad. That wasn't the case from caliphs to 14th century, even 21st century, and that is not the case in the 21st century. So, remember, the claim is there is only one Quran. It is perfect, not even a dot change from that Quran. First, we go to the time of Muhammad. We look at the Islamic tradition and we see at the time of Muhammad, according to Sahih Bukhari, that actually Quran is revealed in different ways. Quran is revealed in different ways. Surah 1 to Surah 114. It is revealed in different ways. We read the story of Hisham and we read the story of Umar. We see those differences are very big deal that they wanted to grab each other. And then we go back to the another hadith. We look at actually best of the reciters, Ubay bin Ka'b. He has the same occasion. He hears the surah, which is very different than what he knows. They all go to Muhammad and Muhammad says, yes, Quran is revealed in many ways, in 7 different ways. But what happens is, those differences are given into the same tribe as different ways. So, they are not the Aru, we don't know what are they, whatever they are different given to the same tribe. We look at the Islamic tradition and then we see actually those differences were given because Muslims were not capable to recite the Quran only one way. Therefore, Allah steps in. After a big deal, Allah gives the Quran in many different ways. And then from that, we just saw at the time of Muhammad, there was not only one Quran. Even the Ahmed DEEDAT, even the Zakir Naik, even Mansur says there was only one Quran, but Muhammad, Prophet of Islam, discredits them. Quran is not only one. We move from Muhammad to time of the caliphs, and then we see actually at the time of caliphs, there wasn't only one Quran. First Quran compiled because recitation, oral tradition was not reliable. Therefore, they compiled the first Quran. Second Quran has been compiled because first Quran wasn't perfect, and also people were calling each other unbelievers in the world. As the second Quran compiled, when we look at all of it, we see actually as the Quran is written down, Muslims, first Caliph of Islam, practiced the Buddha. According to Muhammad, Buddha is evil, therefore Quran can be evil. So at the time of Muhammad, there was not one perfect Quran. At the time of Abu Bakr, there was not one perfect Quran. At the time of Umar, there was not one perfect Quran. At the time of Uthman, there was not one perfect Quran. We look at the Islamic tradition, and then Islamic tradition tells us actually approximately 548 verses got missing as they compiled the Quran. We look at the Islamic tradition. Islamic tradition tells us a sheep came and ate the word of God. So until 656, still there is not one perfect Quran which thought has not been changed. Quran has been corrupted from time of Muhammad to time of Uthman, and there was not one perfect Quran. From Uthman, we look at the Islamic tradition and then we see actually people are talking about lots of different Qurans. In 800s, people are gathering 25 different Arabic Qurans. In 10th century, there are 50 different Qurans. In again 800s, there are 22 different Qurans has been named. In 10th century, there are 26 different Arabic Qurans has been named. And today, you cannot be surprised that when I make a claim that I hold in my possession more than one Arabic Quran. In my possession, I've got 31 different Arabic Qurans. I say different Arabic Qurans because I look at the Quran, which Muslims are translating today. The Quran I hold in my possessions are 31 of them and different from this one. And when I say different, I'm saying actually when you say not even a dot change, dot has been changed. When I say different, when you say not even a word change, I'm saying word change. Quran compares many textual variations and they are identified and named as different Qurans. Let me unpack what I mean with the textual variations. If I am writing a letter to someone and a person B comes and copies that letter and then makes a mistake in a letter, in a verb, or even in a sentence, that is the variation. So when we look at the Arabic Quran, how does this imply? In here, I've got Samarkand manuscripts. If you look at carefully, you will see ellipses, which are edited in a red color form. It is in red color form in this page. This is E20. In this page, you've got 16 ellipses. So those ellipses are the textual variations. They are the differences. Or you look at the top cover manuscripts. You see a verb. They insert the verb into the Quran. In here we've got Paris manuscripts again. The verb has been inserted. This is a consonantal text. They inserted the consonantal letters. So when you put all those things together, we look at historically, Islamic tradition tells us Quranic manuscripts are not reliable and there are thousands of variations. Yet when we look at my 31 different Arabic Qurans, I'm sure you are not amazed that I've got 31 different Arabic Qurans. It contains 56,664 variations and they are all named in
join me in 5 and last 2?
Yes.
5 minutes.
Do that for her, do it for you, yeah?
Yeah, of course. Okay.
3, 2, 1.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So it's quite interesting to hear Hatun making a claim which we will, in the process of this discussion, will learn that this is not the reality. So I begin in the name of Allah, the one and only God, who's the reality of our existence. The God of Moses, the God of Jesus, God of Muhammad, peace be upon them all, who has favored mankind by sending his final book, the Qur'an, as a guidance and taken its role himself to protect it from corruption. He's made it into a book that is inimitable, a book that cannot be matched or something that can be imitated as a miracle, and also to facilitate it to be read and recited and memorized by people easily, all kinds of people, especially then those who are unlettered, those who did not know how to read or write, the young, the old, the children, the women, all of those people, all age groups. So Allah revealed this Qur'an in stages, not all of it in one go, but over a period of 23 years. With His infinite wisdom, He guided the initial recipients with revelation, that some of which, during the nature of the time and place, were substituted with other revelations, a concept known as Nasikh and Mansukh, which we will go through in bit more detail later on. Or some of the ayat, He caused them to be forgotten. But what is important to remember is that the revelation that He caused it to be forgotten, they were substituted or revealed which are better or equal at least. And the final form that was left is what we call the Qur'an that the Prophet ﷺ left to us for the posterity. The final Qur'an that the Prophet left is what is between our hands. The Qur'an, interestingly, we should know, it was written down during the time of the Prophet. The Qur'an attests to that. And its verses were memorized as well, perfectly. The Qur'an was written down and memorized, and the final form was written down. So there was no question of the Qur'an to be in one bound book, because the Qur'an was constantly being revealed as the Prophet was receiving the revelation. When the Prophet passed away, there was even no need yet to compile a book, because the companions had the Qur'an with them. But a crisis happened. Crisis happened in the Muslim world, where in the Battle of Yamama, a lot of Muslims were being martyred. So a crisis, because of this, it was felt the necessary need, not a bid'ah, it is a good bid'ah, as we know. Bid'ah is of different kinds. In this case, is a good, necessary innovation to compile the Qur'an in one mushaf. And it was done during the time of Abu Bakr by an official committee, by an official project where everyone was involved to bring the Qur'an from their material parchments, wherever they are written down, in bones or leaves or stones and so on. So the Qur'an was written down then. It was compiled and it was left. It was not necessary to circulate. Another crisis happened in the Muslim world, where Muslims in Azerbaijan, not knowing or having the etiquettes of reciting the Qur'an with the different ahruf, what was facilitated earlier on, because there were different age groups and unlettered people, they were reciting and saying, my recitation is better than yours. Then this news reached eventually to the Khalif, and the Khalif said, let us now make one standard version of the Qur'an, one official text, which will then be circulated among the community so that people can recite and take this as their standard form of this multi-form Qur'an. Why do I say multi-form? because the Qur'an was revealed in 7 different ways of recitation. It is a well-known, well-transmitted mutawatir hadith that the Prophet said the Qur'an was revealed in 7 ahruf, which we can explain in more detail later on. So, when this Qur'an was compiled, it was done in a way so that these various forms of recitation could be accommodated within this Uthmanic graphic form, the Uthmanic rasm. So it was done. When there was a case where certain readings were not able to be accommodated, it was done within the provinces where the reading was prevalent with the addition or omission of an extra letter or even a word. This is our standard account from our Islamic traditions. So what he ordered, that once this was an official copy made, this was then circulated among with the companions to read this Qur'an, and an order placed so that all of the other non-official copies to be removed from circulations. Even though there were some initially who were hesitant, but eventually all Muslims agreed collectively, yes, this is what we agree that this has been done, and we have no issue with this. Ali bin Abi Talib or Ibn Abdullah bin Masud, they all agreed to these decisions. This Qur'an then was the basis of learning and teaching, of the readings that were taught by the Prophet to the companions. The companions taught their successors, their students. They called it Tabi'un, and they learned from them, and they became famous, some of them, because of their very knowledge of the Qur'an. They established their readings during the time of Ibn Mujahid, also later. You had these readings now collectively agreed by the Muslim scholarship in the community that these are the 10 authentic mutawatir mass transmitted readings of the Qur'an, directly linked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These readings, one thing to understand is this, that there was no difference between them in terms of the number of ayats, whether there is an extra ayah, more or less, whether there's an extra surah, more or less. So all this 21 or 31 or whatever number of Qur'ans we are hearing, they had the same number of Qur'ans, same number of chapters. The ayats have been all the same, no extra ayah, no less ayah, they're all the same. Even the order of the surahs have been the same. So the Qur'an that we have today is what the Qur'an that the Prophet left behind in this multiform text, multiform recitation, through these readings by our companions and the tabi'uns and the scholars of Islam, the Qur'an al-Huffaz. So what our critic Hatun needs to do is this. Hatun, to demonstrate that there are more than one Qur'an, this is what she has to do. She has to avoid arguments based on faulty translation, inauthentic narrations, misunderstanding of our texts, lack of comprehension of our texts, cherry picking or selectively using our text while leaving the others, arguing with straw man or red herrings. So I would like to see some very honest, very academic discussions, evidence brought forth today to demonstrate your point about the Qur'an. You mentioned one thing about the Qur'an manuscripts. This is clearly something that I have already mentioned. Manuscripts will reflect the different readings. But don't forget, manuscripts can have scribal errors where they will be corrected. They will be corrected with any omissions or additions, but our preservation of the Qur'an is not only in writing. Unlike any other book that we see, our preservation is through the heart, memory to memory, that continues from the time of the Prophet to today, and it will continue until the end of the world. So the thing that we see is this: manuscripts of the Qur'an, clearly some of them demonstrates that the Qur'an that we read today is exactly you can read in the manuscripts that we have found in various places in the world. And we will go through some of the examples of those manuscripts later. So I leave with this thought. In fact, I leave with some of the papers mentioning these points that Hatun needs to establish, and we get ticks off when she does that. Please circulate around few people.
Time's up. Don't worry, look, fine. He actually finished 2 seconds early.
He started late. He started 1 minute late.
Okay? So, remember, the claim is that
Sister, 1 second, let me just do this.
So my time is right now.
No. I can start the time again, Dougie, don't worry.
Listen.
That's very...
Give them the pen.
Sister, on the timer.
No, we will start when we're ready.
Here's the thing. The claim is there is only one perfect Quran, not even a dot change. Even though Muslims are sending out handouts, that doesn't help. Remember, at the time of Muhammad, there was never one Quran exist. Remember, at the time of Abu Bakr, there was never one Quran exist. At the time of Umar, there was never one perfect Quran exist. At the time of Uthman, there was never one perfect Quran exist. So, let me just look at the points you mentioned. You said Quran is not it's not only written form, because you acknowledge there are the variations in the written form because it is written by human beings, and then you acknowledge the textual variations in the Quran. Thank you, that helped with my point. So, textual variations stands out as if a dot, if a letter, if a verb, even if a sentence is edited in the Quranic manuscript, which took place, and Mansur acknowledged that. So there are the verses at the time between after the death of Muhammad to Uthman, that we read from the Islamic tradition that people forgotten these verses. Here's the thing. Quran, according to Muslims, it is the eternal word of Allah. And Muhammad forgets certain verses and prays mankind for reminding him the verses. People are complaining there are the verses not in the Quran. And what happens is, that is the moment Allah steps in and then says, no, it's not you are forgetting the verses, I am sending something better or similar. What kind of creator? If he is going to send something similar, he already discrediting what he sent. That questioned the character of creator. Surah 2 verse 106, as it says, I will send something better, it clearly looks in the occasion when man didn't have, because they forgotten the verses, Allah steps in. You talked about Quran to be perfect at the time of Muhammad. Actually, that wasn't the case. Ubay bin Ka'b, Umar, and Hisham, in different occasions, they are talking about this recitation is different, and Allah steps in as the recitation is different. Muhammad steps in. It's like he wants to break the fast. He says, no, Quran is revealed to me in different ways. So the question will stand, where is the 7 different ways of those Qurans? Where are those 7 different recitations that it goes to Umar and Hisham to start a fight? It calls Umar and Hisham, Umar had bad feeling towards Hisham. Where are those 7 different Qurans, 7 different ways of the Qurans, where Muhammad acknowledged? Where are those Qurans are written down in Quran? You said Muhammad saw, Muhammad knew what was written, Muhammad knew what was the Quran. Sadly, no, Muhammad never saw what the Syed bin Thabit wrote it down. Muhammad never saw what the second Quran was Quran. Muhammad never saw Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran. Muhammad never saw Ibn Masud's Quran. And sadly, Muhammad never saw the current Quran you are reciting, Ka'b's Quran. You talked about first Quran is compiled under the Uthman Abu Bakr. Can you just please clarify for us why did early Caliph and including the Zayd bin Thabit, secretary of Muhammad, committed the bid'ah as they compiled the Quran? Even if the recitation was so essential, if Quran is in the heart of man, if Quran for people to memorize, why did people saw only 70 Hafiz died in the Battle of Debunked, and they saw it was urgent for them to compile the Quran and practice the Buddha?
You've got 10 seconds. Okay, go with my time.
Sorry, one person is keeping the time. I think
Let him
that's fine.
check, just check, but let him do that.
5, 3,
Oh, wait. Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, when you mentioned about the Quran hasn't been changed to the dot, you mentioned few people. You mentioned Ahmed DEEDAT, Zakir Naik, you mentioned myself. If you have heard myself, which now I am doubting that you've heard, I've clarified the position. That when we talk about the dots not being changed at all, even to the dot, even to the sound, I am referring to the different readings that have been transmitted to us. So when we talk about the reading of Hafs, for example, the Hafs reading, anywhere in the world today, anywhere you go, this reading we know it's been preserved even to the dot, to the letter, to the vowels, to the sound. So what I will ask Hatun to do instead and challenge her, and this is on the paper, to provide 3 examples of differences between the Hafs readings anywhere in the world. 3 examples of difference between the Warsh readings anywhere in the world. So you have to provide that in your tick list that I've given. So this is what I mean, the readings. As I've explained already, the Quran is a multi-form text. This means the Quran is clearly being recited for ease of recitation and reading in a way that has certain variations divinely sanctioned. For example, what we mentioned about Umar bin al-Khattab and Hisham bin Hakim. They were disagreeing about Surah number 25. He heard this particular companion, Umar, heard reciting this surah, and he recognized it was Surah Al-Furqan. But he recognized that he was reciting in a way that the Prophet taught him differently. He was about to grab him. Now this exercise we will do in another section. What exactly are the differences within Surah number 25 that shows the variations within the ahraf? Okay, we will do that in another section. Now you talk about how the Quran was not perfect during the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, the Quran has always been taught to the companions. Every companion learned the Quran from the Prophet. Whatever they learned was the Quran, and this is what they transmitted. So I don't know what you mean by a perfect Quran. You have to bring me another Quran that the Prophet you think has taught or haven't taught. Umar and Ubay and so on, they all taught and agreed that this is the Quran that the Prophet taught them. It is within their tradition. We received the Quran, Ubay bin Ka'b and Abdullah bin Masud. We learned the Quran today from them. So I'm not sure what you're talking about. About the bid'ah, it was a necessary requirement. This kind of things are not something that is totally forbidden. You get the idea that bid'ah means a forbidden thing. No, bid'ah doesn't mean forbidden. This is a necessary requirement because of the issue, the crisis that happened in the Islamic world. You mentioned about the Prophet ﷺ forgot the verses. No, as a human being, some people can forget. This verse that the Prophet ﷺ forgot, of course, it just had a lapse in memory, that's all. So many other companions memorized it. So many companions got it written down. It didn't disappear from the existence, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. It was all there, it was a lapse of memory only. Now, I did not say the variations in the manuscripts are due to human error. You totally misquote what I just said. I said Scribal errors can happen in the manuscripts, but this is not why we have variations. The variations Uthman did was because of the ahruf. Not all of the readings could be accommodated in one graphic form. That's why the mushaf that he sent to Basra or Kufa or Medina, they had certain differences in letters or prepositions. Now you talk about Samarkand Qur'an, how the alifs are added. This is orthography. It's the same word. How you recite it. Originally the Qur'an was written by people who had no standard way of writing the Qur'an. The Arabs didn't have any book. Qur'an was the first book in the Arabic language. There was no codified grammar. Qur'an came with this writing to establish what the grammar should look like. Yep. The top copy, again, just a scribal insertion. So you haven't shown me anything there's a variation rather than this. Now, you talked about there are 56,000 differences. I would like to see some of them today. I would like to examine them. Yep. Yeah. And the issues about the Qur'an recitation was not reliable, that's not true. The recitation was perfectly reliable. Continues till today.
I'm sure your time's up. The problem is that you just said, well, hey, I want to have it in Arabic now.
Here's the problem. Claim is there is one perfect Quran, not even a dot change. 2017, I've got more than one Arabic Quran and dots have been changed. Here's the definition for the textual variations.
You know Arabic?
Even though Muslims right now start denying textual variation as the scribal errors. Textual variations. I will write a love letter to him. As my love letter have been copied by someone else.
Cool, yeah?
They will make a mistake as they do the copy. As they do the copy. That will be the textual variations. Every dot, every letter, every word edited in that letter will be the textual variations. I am amazed. 2017 at Speaker's Corner Mansur, you stand here and then you say, no, that's not a textual variation, that's the scribal errors. Not, sir, that's a textual variation. That's a textual variation. Check the Oxford Dictionary for that. Sorry, I don't have the Oxford Dictionary with me. So, you said, yes, Muhammad was only human. Of course he had forgotten. Guys, Muhammad is not only human for you. Muhammad is the man Allah trusted and gave his last revelation. He's not only human. You must obey Allah. You must obey Muhammad. Muhammad is the man Allah picked and gave his revelation. Yet it is the same Muhammad, lack of recitation. It is the same Muhammad fails to remember the revelation Allah gave it to him. Remember, Muhammad never saw what Abu Bakr compiled. Muhammad never saw what is compiled under the Uthman. Muhammad never saw what Uthman ordered to be burned. Muhammad never saw what is the Quran. The Quran you are reading, the Quran you are reciting at the mosque. Muhammad never saw this Quran.
But we do the Arabic ones.
Never saw that Quran.
You're in trouble, mate. Trouble.
So, you talked about when you made a claim that not even though they changed, you are talking about the Hafs Quran, you are talking about the Warsh Quran, you are talking about the Al-Bazi Quran. No, sir, that cannot be the case. When you say not even the Quran, don't change in the Quran, you are talking about the Quran, you must be talking about the Quran, which is revealed to Muhammad by an angel Gabriel. That is the same Quran. That is the same Quran. encourage you to respond to my question.
Which one?
What are the 7 different ways those Qur'ans have been revealed? Where are they? Where is the Qur'an which revealed to Muhammad and it is written down at the time of Muhammad? Where is this 114 verses? And you talked about...
Time's up. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You keep on talking about Prophet Muhammad having a lapse of memory about one particular ayah, and you make a mountain out of a molehill. The Prophet immediately remembered. So did he. And how did he remember? Because someone else reminded him. So was it totally forgotten from existence? No. So the Quran did not disappear. The Quran was there, that's what he taught. It just had a lapse of memory like as a human being would have. And the Quran, the Prophet then remembered. That's all. Out of this, I fail to understand how you can make a case that the Quran was totally lost. Because the Prophet remembered, and that's the end of the story. Now you talk about how the Prophet ﷺ, with Hisham and Umar, he recited in 7 different modes. Well, let me tell you how the Quran was revealed in 7 ahruf, which clearly had differences. So when Umar recognized the Surah Furqan being recited, can I show me the time as you speak? Yeah. Being recited, he recognized he was reading slightly differently. Now how did he recognize it? Because slightly there are differences. If there were no variations, then how can he even recognize that it's different? So you keep misunderstanding this. I am not saying the differences of recitation in the manuscripts are scribal errors. Clearly not. What I'm saying, those examples that you've shown are scribal errors, but yes, our manuscripts show these 7 types of recitation. Surah Al-Furqan, for example, now. Who knows very good recitation? Anyone from the Muslims? Okay, I'm going to give you some examples because of short of time, and I'm going to continue. Now, there are differences with letter of the alphabet, markers on the same word, the words have the same meaning, but there's not variation. Variation is words with a different meaning. Variations in the presence or omissions of a letter or word. Variations in word order. These are the different types of modes of recitation that we can examine in our Islamic tradition, because the Prophet did not specify, and I'll tell you in my second section why the Prophet left this unspecified, what the ahruf actually meant. So when we read Surah Al-Furqan, let me start with first ayah. تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا. Those of you who read Hafs or read Hafs, they'll realize that's not how Hafs read it. Hafs read ليكون للعالمين نذيرا. And I read للعالمين نذيرا. It's a difference in tajweed. Quran is in Arabic, recited in Arabic. So when...
Wait! Do you speak Arabic at all?
When... Excuse me. أو يلقي إليه كنز أو تكون له جنة نأكل منها. I read this in a different way than Hafs, because Hafs reads this as أو يلقى إليه كنز أو تكون له جنة يأكل منها. So I read نأكل instead of يأكل, different verb forms. وإذا ألقوا منها مكانا ضيقا مقرنين دعوا هنالك ثبورا. This is the Hafs reading. But if you read Bazzi reading, وإذا ألقوا منها مكانا ضيقا instead of ضيقا. Another example. ويوم تشقق السماء بالغمام ونزل الملائكة تنزيلا. This is how Hafs reads it. But how about this? ويوم تشقق السماء بالغمام وننزل الملائكة تنزيلا. See the difference? نزل and ننزل. ملائكة and ملائكة. Verb form difference. Yeah? أم تحسب أن أكثرهم or أم تحسب أن تحسب or وهو الذي أرسل الرياح نشرا بين. Right? Exactly. We can carry on this example later on.
So, thank you for reciting something which I have no idea what was it.
Why not?
Because you don't know Arabic! You are not an authority on this subject then!
Because I don't know Arabic.
Do you know Arabic?
Isn't that amazing?
Do you know Arabic, Hatun?
Do you know Arabic? I can see the attitude of Muslims. That is the beautiful attitude of Muslims. When a Christian woman stands and speaks, that's what you don't say.
I'm just asking if you know Arabic.
I'm not debating with you right now. I'm talking to Mansur. Can you stop my time? So, it is amazing that you recite 2 pages. You read it 2 pages for us.
Only 3 examples.
You read it 2 pages, 2 examples from Surah 25. Sadly, why are you so scared to translate that to English for us? Why are you scared to translate that to English for us? So we can check it out. What it is you are reading for us? If Allah cannot communicate with me in my language, that is shame on Allah. But here's the thing. SYED's Qur'an, sadly, was not exist at the time of Muhammad. Haf's Qur'an was not exist at the time of Muhammad. Those are entered into the Islamic world approximate 200 years after death of Muhammad. So, even you can look at the readings, authorized readings today, and then you can tell me that those are how it is read, but you never know actually what was Umar and what was the Hashim reciting, and Islamic world will never know that, because at the time of Muhammad there were different Qur'ans. Those differences, people wanted to grab each other. They were disturbing to those were disturbing to each other. So here's the thing. I'm gonna read something for you, Mansur. Can you please follow it up from the Quran? And dear lovely Muslims who are challenging my Arabic will help you out. So here's the
It's your time.
No, you read.
Okay, I want Mansur to read it in his time.
Why don't you read it, Hatun?
I've got another writing from the Quran. I would love Mansur to read it and translate it for us. Here's another one. I'm gonna give it to you, sir. And then I've got another Arabic writing. I would love Mansur to read it and translate it for us to see, even though he recites the Quran for us, does he have any authority? And then I've got four writing. I would love Mansur to read it and translate it for us. And then we will continue. Sir, these are my four things. I'll give them to you in order.
Give me all. Can I have them all? Don't start. Can I have them all?
أبهجنا يا شعلة نور وضاء يا ديمة خير وعطاء ويمام نقاء.
كن سعيدا كن فريدا عش بفخر في الحياة لا تبالي